Hello and welcome to another top grade video. We are looking at the IGCSE paper from Cambridge and I'm using the sample paper from 2019. This is completely free from Cambridge Exam Board and you can just click on the past papers and make sure that you're looking at first language 0990. My job in this video is to simplify the slightly complex mark scheme so you can see that you have 5 assessment objectives and then the examiners give you both a general set of criteria and a specific set of criteria to your descriptive writing. Perhaps confusingly, this is also broken up into composition, style and accuracy, as well as composition, content and structure. Well, my job is to make that simple and clear. So let's start with the general stuff in the mark scheme, which is this column here. And as we go through this, you'll notice that the word description doesn't even appear. So for assessment objective 1, you have to articulate experience and express what's thought and felt. Well, what does that mean for your writing? It really means that you have to place someone in it who has experiences, thoughts and feelings. So you really need to invent a persona from whose point of view you can tell this. And something that will force you to be descriptive and creative is to choose a persona that is not necessarily yourself. Next, assessment objective 2 wants you to sequence your description. Now that often causes a lot of problems because you end up having a narrative where things are sequenced through time. So instead we have to think of a logical order that isn't depending on time. In fact, everything in your description is going to happen within the same 10 to 30 seconds. If it goes on longer than 30 seconds, it might turn into a narrative. An interesting way of sequencing it is going to be to think about the final image, which will refer back to something earlier on in your description, particularly at the beginning. We'll pick up on that idea later. Next, you have to use a range of vocabulary, and many students forget the word appropriate. What does appropriate mean here? It means pick the right words to help your readers understand what you're on about. Don't go to the Thesaurus and pick show-off words. The whole point of your vocabulary choices being appropriate is to help your reader see the persona's viewpoints, their feelings and their thoughts, to understand them. Next, assessment objective 4, use register appropriate to your audience. Register here means choice of language. In other words, this language should not be so difficult to understand that it wouldn't fit easily into a book like Harry Potter. You can pick your own favourite authors, but your writing needs to fit into one of those books. There isn't something extra that you're doing with description. You're trying to write like a real writer. And then obviously you have to be accurate. Now if you want to learn to be accurate with punctuation and spelling, a really slow way to do that is write and then go back and check. Now the reason that's slow is you'll never learn the habit of actually getting it right first time. So what you really need to do is get into the habit of checking every time you write a sentence. At first that will be quite difficult because you might think it interrupts the flow of your ideas, which at the beginning it will, but that's the only quick way to improve your accuracy. Now the other reason that's important is that in the exam you often won't have time to go back and check. So not only will you have made more mistakes, you'll have less time to spot them. Now we're going to look at the specific stuff that's for descriptive writing in band 7, where the top grades are. And what the examiner wants is well-defined and developed images. An image is a complete picture, and I'm going to define many as about 6. Now to help you write something that would be appropriate to Harry Potter or another book, you have to begin with something concrete, something the audience will recognise instantly. It hasn't got to be a description they have to guess at what's being described. Then you're going to describe that thing from your persona's perspective. That's where the interesting element of your description will be. Next, your images have to go together to create a convincing overall picture. Well, how do you do that? You need to think about the sequence of your images so that each one builds on the one that went before. You shouldn't be able to put these paragraphs in a different order and still make sense. An easy way to do that, as I'll show you in later videos, is to introduce a motif, a recurring theme or idea. Another way of getting a recurring theme is to build in an extended metaphor. For example, all the way through your description, you might have language from the same kind of sphere, like natural history or the military or nature, and I'll show you that in later videos as well. As I mentioned before, you want to make sure that the last image refers back to an earlier image. That's a really easy way to show the reader and the examiner that you have an overall picture that kind of makes sense as a whole and gives a new perspective at the end from the one that we had at the beginning. Remember, that's your persona's perspective. And I'm going to suggest you have one paragraph per image, so you're going to have 6 paragraphs. You can play with this as we go through, but that will definitely give you enough detail for full marks. Now the examiners give us a really top tip. They would like some varieties of focus. Now the reason I really like this is that you focus a camera or a video camera, and that gives us the perfect route into description. So all the images are going to come from the same scene. Well, the easiest way to have lots of different places of focus is to imagine one scene, but then film it or photograph it from different parts of the same scene. So you might have different locations within the scene, or you might think in terms of close-up or wide angle, a panning shot where the camera just moves across a scene, or a tracking shot where the camera stays with an object that's moving within the scene. Or another way of thinking of it, if you're at all cultural and go to any kind of art galleries or museums, is to imagine your descriptions as a sequence of 6 photographs. Imagine them huge, at least the size of your television, and they're displayed on an art gallery wall. The last 2 areas are also where students often go wrong. It's easy to think that if our content is going to be complex and sophisticated, it has to be difficult to understand. And that's actually the opposite. The main thing is that it must still be realistic. How do I interpret realistic here? It should realistically fit into a good novel, one written by one of your favourite authors. Now by that I don't mean that 350 words would feel realistic. There aren't many authors that would spend more than 100 words on a piece of description, and they often do a lot less. So instead you need to think about each paragraph on its own, easily fitting within a novel. This will help you think like a writer rather than someone who's just chucking in loads of descriptive techniques. Because real writers don't do that. This last idea here, having a subtle and effective sense of audience, is really difficult to understand. So the way I've translated that is actually think about your persona who's seeing things. If we can see it from their convincing point of view, that will automatically be subtle and effective. So just create a persona who's going to describe things for us and we'll be fine. Next, the examiners want varied sentence structures. And we might think of things like, one-word sentences or whole paragraphs that are just one sentence at the other extreme. And you can do that, but the easiest way to learn how to use different sentence structures is simply to do this. Start every sentence with a different word. Now, real writers won't make sure that absolutely every single one is with a different word, but while you're practicing writing, this is a fantastic way to build up skill. So if you force yourself to start every sentence with a different word, over time you'll get used to the different effects that you can achieve, and then it will become automatic that most sentences start in a different way, and simply doing that will change the structure of your sentences. After that, then you can start playing with some show-off sentences like the overloaded list, which you'll meet in future videos, or paragraphs which follow the same structure, the same rhythm of sentences. I'll be teaching you that in later videos as well. Or indeed anything else that you find you enjoy in the writing of authors that you read. Because they're published authors. What they're doing must be pretty damn good, and certainly good enough for a GCSE.